3 years ago, Camille Laurent stood in the center aisle of St. Patrick's Cathedral, wearing a $20,000 Vera Wang gown, waiting for a groom who would never show. Henri Prescott didn't just break her heart, he humiliated her in front of New York's entire elite. He ran away to chase power, money, and a legacy without her. But time is a funny thing. Henri thought he was climbing the corporate ladder, but he didn't realize he was building the very stairs Camille would walk down to crush him. He left her at the altar as a victim. Today she returns as his boss, and she's not interested in an apology. She's interested in an audit. The silence in St. Patrick's Cathedral was not peaceful. It was suffocating. It was the kind of silence that had mass pressing against the lungs of the 300 guests sitting in the pews. Camille Laurent stood in the narthex, her fingers gripping the bouquet of white calla lilies so tightly that the green stems were beginning to snap, staining her silk gloves. The organist had been playing Canon in D on a loop for 20 minutes. It had gone from beautiful to anxious, and finally to pathetic. "He's just stuck in traffic, darling," her mother, Evelyn, whispered, though her eyes were darting toward the heavy oak doors, looking for a groomsman, a messenger, anyone. "The Midtown Tunnel is a nightmare on Saturdays." Camille didn't answer. She knew because Henri Prescott was never late. Henri was the kind of man who set his watch 3 minutes fast just to have the psychological edge on the world. He was the VP of operations for Prescott & Co., a man who scheduled his coffee breaks. If he wasn't here, it wasn't traffic. It was a decision. The heavy oak doors creaked open, but it wasn't Henri. It was Liam O'Connor, Henry's best man and oldest friend. Liam's face was the color of old ash. He wasn't wearing his suit jacket. His tie was undone. He looked like a man walking toward a firing squad. He didn't walk to the guests. He walked straight to Camille. "Camille," Liam said, his voice cracking. He didn't look at her face, he looked at the floor. "I'm so sorry." "Where is he?" Camille asked. Her voice was steady, terrifyingly so. Liam reached into his pocket and pulled out a cream-colored envelope. It wasn't sealed, it was hasty. "He told me to give you this. He's already at Teterboro. The plane left 10 minutes ago." The plane. The Prescott corporate jet. Camille took the envelope. She didn't tear it open. She unfolded it with the precision of a surgeon. The handwriting was jagged, scrawled in blue ink. Likely written against a dashboard or a wall. "Camille, I can't do this. I thought I could be the man you need, but I can't breathe. The merger with the Beauchamp Group. It's going through, but only if I'm unencumbered. They want a clean slate. I have to go to London. I'm sorry, you deserve better than a man who chooses the company over the woman. Don't wait for me. H. Unencumbered. The word hung in her mind like a guillotine blade. She wasn't a bride, she was an encumbrance, a liability to a merger. Camille looked up. The guests were murmuring now, the sound rising like the buzz of angry wasps. She saw Henri's mother in the front row, looking less concerned and more annoyed, checking her diamond watch. "Camille?" her mother asked, trembling. "What does it say?" Camille didn't cry. That was the twist no one expected. The tears didn't come. Instead, a cold, hard shutter slammed down behind her eyes. She felt the death of the girl she had been. The girl who baked cookies. The girl who believed in Henri's soft side. The girl who thought love was a partnership. That girl died right there in the vestibule of the cathedral. "He's gone," Camille said, her voice projecting loud enough for the back pews to hear. She turned to Liam, who looked ready to vomit. "Tell the organist to stop. Tell the guests the reception is cancelled. And Liam?" "Yes?" "Tell Henri that if I ever see him again, he better be standing on higher ground than me, because I'm going to bury him." She turned around, the massive train of her dress sweeping across the stone floor, and walked out the front doors alone, straight into the blinding flash of the paparazzi who had been tipped off that the wedding of the year was now the scandal of the decade. 3 years later, London was grey, wet, and utterly indifferent to her existence, which was exactly why Camille loved it. In New York, she was the jilted bride. In London, she was just C.L. Vane. She had dropped her surname, adopting her middle name Vane as a shield. She had cut her hair from waist-length blonde waves to a sharp, asymmetrical bob dyed a deep midnight black. The soft pastels of her wardrobe were replaced by monochromatic structure, charcoal, slate, obsidian. She wasn't just working, she was hunting. Camille had joined the Sterling Group, a boutique architecture firm known for brutalist, high-stakes commercial designs. She worked 18-hour days. She didn't date. She didn't socialize. She poured every ounce of her rage into steel and glass. She became known in the industry as the Ice Pick, sharp, effective, and dangerous to handle. It was a Tuesday in November when the call came. She was standing on the 40th floor of a construction site in Canary Wharf, yelling at a contractor about the tensile strength of a support beam, when her phone buzzed. "Ms. Vane?" The voice was gravelly, old money. "This is Richard Beauchamp." Camille signaled for the contractor to stop drilling. Beauchamp. The name triggered a muscle memory of pain. The Beauchamp Group was the company Henri had merged with. They were the reason he left. "Mr. Beauchamp," Camille said, her voice cool. "To what do I owe the pleasure? I'm currently standing in wet cement." "I've seen your work on the Kensington Spire," Richard said. "It's aggressive, it's soulless, it's perfect. I charge a premium for soulless. I'm looking for a lead architect for a new project, the Obsidian Tower. We're building it in Hudson Yards, New York. It's going to be the headquarters for our new North American division." New York, the scene of the crime. "I don't work in New York," Camille said, turning to look out at the fog over the Thames. "You do for this price," Richard said, naming a figure that was 3 times her current salary, plus equity. "And one more thing, Ms. Vane. The project is currently being managed by our VP of Development, but he lacks vision. He's good at logistics, bad at art. I need someone to come in and overrule him. I need a boss who isn't afraid to break things." Camille's heart hammered against her ribs, a slow, heavy war drum. "Who is the VP of Development?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "Henri Prescott. You might know the name. He's a bit of a rising star in the tabloids." Camille closed her eyes and inhaled the scent of wet concrete and rain. The universe wasn't just knocking, it was kicking the door down. "Mr. Beauchamp," Camille said, a razor-thin smile touching her lips for the first time in years. "I'll take the job, but I have one condition." "Name it." "Total autonomy. If I say the wall moves, the wall moves. If I say the budget doubles, it doubles. And if I say the VP is incompetent, he's removed from the room. Is that understood?" Richard Beauchamp chuckled. "I think you're going to fit right in, Ms. Vane. Welcome to the Shark Tank." The conference room at Beauchamp Global's New York temporary office was designed to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling glass overlooking the Hudson River, a table made of reclaimed black walnut that cost more than most cars, and air conditioning set to a temperature that required a jacket. Henri Prescott sat at the head of the table, tapping his pen against a leather notebook. He looked older than 32. There was a little grey at his temples now, and the easy boyish smile that had once charmed Camille into believing in fairy tales was gone, replaced by a permanent furrow between his brows. "Listen," Henri said to the room of nervous junior architects. "The new creative director is flying in from London this morning. Richard hired her personally. I don't know who she is, but she goes by C.L. Vane. Rumour has it she fired her last project manager for wearing brown shoes to a client meeting. Let's just get through the briefing, keep the designs conservative, and I'll handle her." "You'll handle her?" The voice came from the doorway. It was low, smoky, and laced with distinct British inflection, an affectation Camille had picked up in London. Henri froze. The pen stopped tapping. The heavy glass doors swung open. Camille walked in. She was wearing a white suit, stark, blinding white, a deliberate mockery of the dress she had worn 3 years ago. Her black hair was sharp enough to cut glass. She wore 4-inch stiletto heels that clicked against the marble floor like gunshots. She didn't look at the staff. She looked straight at Henri. Henri's face drained of colour. He stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. He looked like he was seeing a ghost. "Camille," he whispered. The room went silent. The junior architects looked back and forth between their boss and the newcomer. Camille didn't blink. She walked to the other end of the table, placing her briefcase down with a soft thud. "Ms. Vane," she corrected him, "and you must be Mr. Prescott. Richard told me you were managing the logistics." "Camille, what are you doing here?" Henri stepped around the table, his hand reaching out instinctively, as if to touch her arm. I heard you were in Europe. I tried to. Mr. Prescott, Camille snapped, her voice cracking like a whip. Sit down. Henri stopped. The authority in her voice was absolute. It wasn't the voice of the girl who used to ask him which tie he preferred. It was the voice of a woman who signed the checks. We are here to discuss the Obsidian Tower, Camille said, addressing the room, ignoring Henri's shock. She clicked a remote, and the projector screen flared to life, showing a rendering of the building Henri had designed. It was a standard glass rectangle. Boring. Safe. This, Camille said, gesturing to the screen, is garbage. It looks like a filing cabinet had sex with a toaster. A few junior associates stifled laughs. Henri's jaw tightened. That design was approved by the board, Henri said, his voice regaining some of its defensive edge. It's efficient. It maximizes square footage. It maximizes boredom, Camille countered. We are scraping it, all of it. We are starting from zero. You can't just scrap 6 months of work, Henri argued. I'm the project lead, and I am the creative director with absolute veto power, Camille said, leaning forward, her hands flat on the table. She stared into Henri's eyes, searching for the man she loved and finding only a corporate suit. Richard Beauchamp gave me the reins, Henri. You're just the horse. Now, do you want to pull the cart, or do you want to be put out to pasture? Henri stared at her. The air in the room was electric. He saw the ring on her finger, not a wedding band, but a thick onyx signet ring. He saw the coldness. And he saw something else, revenge. Fine, Henri said through gritted teeth. We do it your way, for now. Good. Camille sat down at the head of the table, his seat. Now get me a coffee. Black, 2 sugars. And Henri? He paused. Make sure it's hot. I hate tepid things. They remind me of your commitment. The next 3 weeks were a war of attrition. Camille moved into the corner office, the one adjacent to Henri's. She ordered the glass wall between their offices to be frosted, effectively erasing him from her view. Every meeting was a battleground. If Henri suggested steel, Camille demanded titanium. If Henri wanted to cut costs on the lobby, Camille ordered Italian marble imported from a specific quarry in Carrara. She was pushing him, testing his limits, waiting for him to break. But Henri didn't break. He took it. He stayed late, reworking the budgets to accommodate her insane demands. He fetched her coffee, though he eventually delegated it to an intern. He watched her with a mixture of frustration and a strange, lingering fascination. One rainy Tuesday night, they were the last 2 left in the office. The blueprints for the lobby were spread out across the central table. You're doing this on purpose, Henri said. He was leaning against the doorframe, his tie loosened. Camille didn't look up from her sketches. Doing what? My job? You're trying to bankrupt the project to spite me. That cantilevered balcony you want. It's structurally impossible without reinforcing the entire foundation. Then reinforce the foundation, Camille said calmly. Or are you afraid of a little hard work? Henri walked into the room and slammed his hand down on the blueprints. Stop it, Camille. The nickname hung in the air. Camille finally looked up. Her eyes were dangerous. Don't call me that. Why did you come back? Henri asked, his voice lowering, turning desperate. To torture me? You think I don't know what I did? You think I haven't lived with it every single day for 3 years? I don't think about you at all, Henri, Camille lied. I came back because I'm the best architect in the hemisphere, and your father-in-law knows it. Henri flinched. Richard isn't my father-in-law. Camille paused. Excuse me? I didn't marry Sophia. The silence that followed was louder than the thunder outside. Sophia Beauchamp, the daughter of the CEO, the woman everyone assumed Henri had left Camille for. The merger he had mentioned in his note. I didn't marry her, Henri repeated. I'm engaged to her. The wedding is next month. Camille let out a short, cruel laugh. 3 years? You've been engaged for 3 years? What's the matter, Henri? Cold feet again? It's complicated, Henri said, running a hand through his hair. The deal. The merger took longer than expected. Richard kept moving the goalposts. I couldn't marry her until the deal was finalized. So you sold me out for a deal you haven't even closed yet. Camille stood up, walking around the table until she was inches from him. She could smell his cologne, sandalwood, and regret. You are pathetic. You traded a life with me for a promise from a man who eats people like you for breakfast. I did it to save you, Henri shouted. The words bounced off the glass walls. Camille frowned. What? Henri looked like he had said too much. He backed away. Nothing. Forget it. No, Camille said, grabbing his arm. You said you did it to save me. Save me from what? From debt, Henri said, his voice a whisper. From ruin. My father embezzled money from the Beauchamp Group 10 years ago. Richard found out the week before our wedding. He gave me a choice. Either I marry Sophia and merge my family's company into his to cover the losses, or he sends my father to prison and sues my entire family into oblivion. He would have come after you too, Camille. He threatened to ensure you never worked in this city again. Camille stared at him. The revelation was like a physical blow. So you left me? To protect me? I left you so you wouldn't be dragged down with a criminal family, Henri said, his eyes wet. I had to make you hate me. It was the only way you'd let go. Camille looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in 3 years. She saw the lines of stress, the exhaustion. He wasn't a villain. He was a hostage. But then the steel in her spine stiffened. You're a fool, Henri, she whispered. What? You thought you could decide my life for me. You didn't ask me if I wanted to fight. You didn't give me the choice to stand by you. You just left. She pulled her arm away. That's not love. That's arrogance. I'm doing this for us, Henri pleaded. Once the merger is done, I'll have the power. I can fix things. There is no us, Camille said, stepping back. And if you think Richard Beauchamp is ever going to let you have power, you're even dumber than you look. Get out of my office. Henri stood there for a moment, looking broken, before turning and walking out. Camille watched him go. Her heart was racing, but her mind was already calculating. Henri was being played. Richard Beauchamp was the puppeteer. And Camille Vane just decided she was going to cut the strings. If Henri was the ghost haunting the halls of Beauchamp Global, Sophia Beauchamp was the poltergeist throwing the furniture. Camille met her 3 days after the confrontation with Henri. It was at the active construction site of the Obsidian Tower in Hudson Yards. The skeleton of the building was rising, a massive cage of steel and concrete jutting into the grey Manhattan sky. It was a place of hard hats, welding sparks, and shouting foremen. It was not a place for pink Chanel suits. Sophia Beauchamp stepped out of a black Escalade, her heels sinking immediately into the gravel. She was beautiful in a way that cost money. Perfect teeth, perfect skin, and hair so blonde it looked like spun gold. She didn't look like a fiancée, she looked like an acquisition. Camille was standing by the freight elevator, reviewing load-bearing schematics with the site foreman, a burly man named Kowalski. Excuse me, Sophia's voice cut through the din of jackhammers like a high-pitched drill. Where is Henri? Kowalski looked at Camille, rolling his eyes. Camille didn't look up from her clipboard. He's in a budget meeting, Ms. Beauchamp, Camille said, her voice flat. And this is a hard hat zone. Unless that tweed jacket is reinforced with Kevlar, you're violating safety protocols. Sophia marched over, ignoring the mud splattering her pristine ankles. She stopped 2 feet from Camille, looking her up and down with a sneer that would have withered a lesser woman. You must be the help my father flew in from London, Sophia said. C.L. Vane. I've heard about you. Henri says you're difficult. I'm efficient, Camille corrected, finally looking up. Her dark eyes locked onto Sophia's blue ones. And Henri isn't paid to have opinions on my personality. He's paid to execute my designs. Sophia laughed, a brittle, tinkling sound. Don't get comfortable, honey. Once the wedding happens next month and the merger is finalized, Henri will be CEO. And the first thing he's going to do is fire you. We're going to turn this ugly glass monstrosity into a hotel. A Beauchamp hotel. Camille felt a cold spike of adrenaline. A hotel. That would require gutting the entire interior architecture, her work. Henri agreed to the office complex design, Camille said. Henri agrees to whatever I tell him to. Sophia smirked, stepping closer. He's a good dog. He knows who holds the leash. You think he left you at the altar because of some noble sacrifice. Please. He left you because he wanted to be a Beauchamp more than he wanted to be a… whatever you are. A nobody. It was a lie. Camille knew it was a lie because she had seen the raw terror in Henri's eyes just nights before. But Sophia didn't know that. Sophia thought she won. You really think he loves you? Camille asked softly. I don't care if he loves me, Sophia hissed, her mask slipping for a fraction of a second. I own him. My father bought his family's debt, and now we own the Prescott name. He's my trophy husband, and you're just the contractor hired to build his cage. Sophia turned on her heel to leave, but stopped. Oh, and Vane, stay away from him. If I see you in his office late at night again, I won't just fire you. I'll make sure you never work in this city again. My father has friends in very low places. As the Escalade sped away, splattering mud onto Camille's boots, the architect didn't feel fear. She felt clarity. Henri wasn't just a hostage. He was being tortured. And the merger wasn't a business deal. It was an execution of his dignity. Camille pulled out her phone and dialed a number she hadn't called in 3 years. Liam, she said when the line picked up. There was a stunned silence on the other end. Camille? Is that you? Meet me at the Oak Room in an hour, and bring everything you know about the Prescott family finances. We're going to perform an audit. The Oak Room was dark, smelling of aged whiskey and cigar smoke. It was the kind of place where deals were made in whispers. Liam O'Connor looked different. The stress of being Henri's right-hand man during the hostile takeover had aged him. He looked tired, but when he saw Camille, a flicker of the old warmth returned. You look terrifying, Liam said, sliding into the booth opposite her. In a good way. London suited you. Cut the pleasantries, Liam, Camille said, ordering a sparkling water. Henri told me about the embezzlement, about his father. Liam choked on his drink. He told you? Jesus, he wasn't supposed to say a word. Richard Beauchamp made him sign an NDA so strict he could lose his citizenship if he breathed a word of it. He told me because he's drowning, Camille said, leaning in. He thinks marrying Sophia will fix it. He thinks once the merger is done, the debt is forgiven. Liam looked down at his hands. That's the deal. Richard absorbs the liability. Henri becomes CEO of the combined entity, and the Prescott legacy is saved. And you believe that? Camille asked, her voice sharp. Since when does a shark let the seal go after taking a bite? Richard Beauchamp doesn't want a partner. He wants a scapegoat. She pulled a folder from her bag. It contained the preliminary budget reports for the Obsidian Tower, documents she had access to as creative director. Look at this, she pointed to a line item. Beauchamp Global is funneling construction funds into a shell company in the Caymans called Apex Holdings. They're overcharging us for materials by 400%. Steel that costs $100 a ton is being billed at $500. Liam squinted at the paper. So, Richard is skimming off the top. Rich guys do it all the time. No, Camille said. He's doing it under Henri's signature. Henri is the project lead. He signs the checks. When the IRS or the SEC looks at this project, they won't see Richard's name. They'll see Henri's. Liam's face went white. He's framing him, Liam whispered. Richard is setting Henri up to take the fall for a massive money laundering scheme. Exactly, Camille said. Richard isn't going to save the Prescott family. He's going to use Henri to clean his dirty money, and then when the feds come knocking, he'll throw Henri to the wolves. Henri will go to prison for 20 years, and Richard will walk away with the assets. Does Henri know? No, he's too busy trying to be the good soldier to look at the books. He trusts the wrong people. Liam slammed his fist on the table. We have to tell him. If we tell him, he'll panic, Camille said, shaking her head. He'll confront Richard, and Richard will destroy the evidence before we can secure it. We need proof. Irrefutable proof. And I need to get it before the engagement gala on Friday. How? The server room at the Beauchamp headquarters. The original ledgers are on the local drive, not the cloud. Richard is old school. He doesn't trust the internet. That server room is a fortress, Camille. Biometric scanners, keycards. Camille smiled, and it was the smile of the wolf at the door. Good thing I'm the lead architect, she said. I designed the ventilation system renovation last week. I know exactly where the blind spots are. Thursday night, 2:00 a.m. The Beauchamp Global Headquarters was a silent monolith in the center of Manhattan. Camille wasn't wearing a cat burglar suit. She was wearing her hard hat and a reflective vest, hiding in plain sight. She had scheduled an emergency HVAC inspection with the night security team, a plausible excuse given the recent storms. She walked past the sleepy guard at the front desk, flashing her badge. Leak on the 40th floor. Gotta check the server cooling units before the system overheats. The guard waved her through without looking up from his phone. Camille took the service elevator up. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. If she was caught, this was corporate espionage. Prison time. But she couldn't stop thinking about Henri's face 3 years ago, the pain in his eyes she had mistaken for cowardice. She reached the 40th floor. The server room was at the end of the hall. She didn't have a keycard, but she had a blowtorch. Well, a micro laser cutter she used for model making. It was small, precise, and hot enough to melt the locking mechanism of the side service panel. 30 seconds later, she was inside. The room hummed with the sound of 1,000 hard drives spinning. The air was frigid. She found the main terminal. She plugged in a USB drive Liam had given her, loaded with a decryption program he'd bought from a questionable source on the dark web. Accessing, password required. Camille swore softly. Of course, she tried the obvious ones. Beauchamp 1, Obsidian. Money, nothing. Then she thought about Richard Beauchamp. The man was a narcissist. He didn't love money, he loved winning. He loved taking things from other people. She typed in, victory, access denied. She thought about Sophia. The trophy. She typed in, legacy, access granted. The screen flooded with data. Camille's eyes scanned the rows of numbers. It was worse than she thought. It wasn't just the Obsidian Tower. Richard had been laundering cartel money through Prescott and Cubby's accounts for 5 years, long before the merger. The embezzlement Henry's father was accused of. It was a fabrication. Richard had planted the evidence to force the merger so he could use the Prescott accounts as a dump for his illegal funds. Henry's father wasn't a criminal. He was a victim, and Henri was the next sacrifice. Got you, Camille whispered. She initiated the download. The progress bar crawled, 10%, 40%, 80%. Suddenly the lights in the server room flickered and turned fully on. I didn't think architects worked the graveyard shift. Camille froze. She slowly pulled the USB drive out, shoving it into her bra. She turned around. Richard Beauchamp was standing in the doorway. He was wearing a tuxedo, likely just returning from a late dinner. He held a suppressed pistol in his hand, casually, as if it were a cigar. Behind him stood 2 large men who looked very much like they broke legs for a living. Ms. Vane, Richard smiled, stepping into the room. Or should I say, the almost Mrs. Prescott. I wondered when you'd figure it out. You're too smart for your own good. That's why I told Henri to leave you. A woman like you asks too many questions. Camille raised her hands, her mind racing. You framed them. Henri's father didn't steal a dime. Does it matter? Richard shrugged. History is written by the winners, and tonight I win. You can't shoot me in your own server room, Camille said, her voice trembling but defiant. The cameras. The cameras are on a loop, Richard said, and tragic accidents happen at construction sites all the time. A fall down an elevator shaft. So sad. He raised the gun. Henri will know, Camille said. Henri? Richard laughed. Henri is a broken man. He'll believe whatever I tell him. He'll probably cry at your funeral and then sign the merger papers the next day. Richard cocked the hammer. Click. The lights went out. Not just in the room, the entire building plunged into darkness. What the hell? Richard shouted. Camille didn't wait. She knew the floor plan. She dropped to the floor and rolled to the left, behind a rack of servers. Get her! Richard screamed in the dark, but Camille was already moving. She had tripped the main breaker on her way in, setting a timer on the fuse box. A failsafe. She crawled through the raised flooring, scrambling toward the ventilation shaft she had designed. She kicked the grate open and squeezed inside just as flashlights swept the room. She's in the vents, one of the guards yelled. Camille scrambled through the metal tunnel, the sharp edges tearing at her clothes, the dust choking her. She could hear them banging on the metal behind her. She slid down the main chute, landing hard in the laundry collection room on the basement level. She burst out of the service exit into the alleyway, gasping for air, clutching her chest where the USB drive burned against her skin. She was alive. And she had the gun. Now she just had to pull the trigger. The grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel smelled of expensive gardenias, chilled vintage champagne, and moral decay. It was the kind of event that New York society lived for, a convergence of old money, new power, and the desperate climbers who tried to bridge the gap between the two. Crystal chandeliers, massive and dripping with light, hung overhead like suspended diamonds. The tables were draped in ivory silk, set with silver that had been polished until it gleamed like mirrors. In the center of it all stood Henri Prescott. He was wearing a bespoke tuxedo that cost more than most people's annual rent. Yet he felt like he was wearing a shroud. He stood near the head table, a glass of untouched scotch in his hand, watching the room swirl around him. To the casual observer, he was the envy of the city, the heir to the Prescott legacy, the future CEO of the merged Beauchamp-Prescott empire, and the fiancé of the dazzling Sophia Beauchamp. To Henri, he was a man standing on a trapdoor, waiting for the lever to be pulled. Sophia was attached to his arm like a barnacle made of diamonds and malice. She was wearing a gown of sheer silver, designed to make her look like a star descended from the heavens. She was smiling, waving at photographers and occasionally digging her manicured nails into Henri's bicep whenever his smile faltered. "Stop looking like you're at an execution, darling," Sophia hissed, keeping her teeth clenched in a perfect camera-ready smile. "The board members are watching. If you look miserable, stock prices drop. If stock prices drop, Daddy gets angry. And you know what happens when Daddy gets angry." Henri took a sip of the scotch. It tasted like ash. "I'm just tired, Sophia." "You can sleep when you're dead," she chirped, turning to wave at a senator. "Or when the merger is signed, whichever comes first." Henri looked out at the sea of faces. He saw rivals he had crushed, friends he had neglected, and potential partners who only wanted to shake his hand because they thought he was about to become the king of New York real estate. They didn't know the truth. They didn't know that the merger was a hostile takeover disguised as a wedding. They didn't know that Richard Beauchamp held the evidence of Henri's father's embezzlement like a loaded gun to Henri's temple. Marry the girl, merge the companies, bury the scandal. That was the deal. Henri had sold his soul to save his family name. He had sold her, Camille, to save his father from prison. And every day for the last 3 years, the silence of that decision had screamed in his ears. "Ladies and gentlemen," the booming voice of Richard Beauchamp cut through the murmur of the crowd. The room went silent as all eyes turned to the stage. Richard stood at the podium, looking every inch the titan of industry. He was a broad man with silver hair and a smile that didn't quite reach his shark-like eyes. He raised a glass of champagne, basking in the attention. "Tonight is a historic night," Richard bellowed, his voice echoing off the gilded ceiling. "Tonight we don't just celebrate the union of my beautiful daughter Sophia to the capable Henri Prescott. We celebrate the union of 2 great American dynasties. Beauchamp Global and Prescott & Cubbins are becoming one." Polite applause rippled through the room. Henri felt bile rise in his throat. "This merger isn't just business," Richard continued, placing a hand over his heart in a performance of mock sincerity. "It's about family. It's about legacy. It's about protecting the future. And speaking of the future, I have a little surprise presentation. A look back at the history that brought us here." Richard gestured to the massive LED screens that flanked the stage. The lights in the ballroom dimmed. The crowd hushed, expecting a montage of childhood photos or corporate milestones. The screens flickered, but instead of a photo of Sophia as a child or a rendering of a new skyscraper, the screens remained black. A high-pitched feedback whine tore through the speaker system, causing guests to cover their ears. Sophia frowned, looking toward the audio booth. "What are those idiots doing?" Then the screens flared to life. It wasn't a slideshow, it was a live video feed. The camera angle was low, gritty, and shaking slightly. It showed the interior of a dimly lit room lined with metal racks. Blue lights blinked in the darkness. "Is that a server room?" someone whispered near the front. "Cut the feed," Richard shouted, his jovial mask slipping instantly. "Technical difficulties. Cut it." But the feed didn't cut. Instead, a voice, clear, cold, and unmistakably authoritative, rang out over the ballroom speakers, overriding Richard's microphone. "Legacies are built on stone, Richard, not on lies." The double doors at the far end of the ballroom slammed open with a sound like a thunderclap. Every head in the room turned. 300 people gasped in unison. Standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the bright lights of the lobby, was Camille Vane. She wasn't wearing the sensible architect's suits she had worn for weeks. She wasn't wearing the white of a bride, she was wearing red. A blood-red, floor-length silk gown that clung to her body like liquid fire. It was backless, daring, and dangerous. Her dark hair was slicked back, sharp and severe, and her lips were painted a shade of crimson that matched the dress. She didn't look like a guest. She looked like the angel of death. "Security!" Richard screamed, pointing a shaking finger at her. "Get that woman out of here. She's trespassing." 2 large security guards moved toward her, but Camille didn't flinch. She held up a small black remote in her right hand. "If anyone touches me," Camille said, her voice amplified by a headset mic she was already wearing, "I press this button, and the file currently queued on those screens goes to the SEC, the FBI, and every news outlet in the Northern Hemisphere. Your stock will be worth less than toilet paper before the market opens tomorrow." The guards hesitated. They looked at Richard. Richard looked at the remote, sweat beading on his forehead. "Let her speak," a voice said from the front table. It was the senator. He was looking at Camille with intense interest. Camille began to walk. She moved down the center aisle, the red silk trailing behind her on the white carpet like a wound. The crowd parted for her, terrified and mesmerized. She walked with a rhythm that was hypnotic, slow, deliberate, predatory. She walked straight toward Henri. Henri couldn't breathe. He felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. She was the most beautiful, terrifying thing he had ever seen. She was the woman he had left, the woman he had broken, and now she was the woman who had come to burn his world down. "Camille," he whispered, the name falling from his lips like a prayer. She stopped 5 feet from him. She didn't look at Sophia. She didn't look at Richard. She locked eyes with Henri. "You like the dress?" she asked, her voice low and intimate, amplified for the whole room to hear. "I bought it for a funeral. Turns out it's a wedding." "You're making a scene, you trash," Sophia shrieked, stepping in front of Henri. "Who do you think you are?" "I'm the architect," Camille said, finally glancing at Sophia with bored indifference. "And I'm here to point out a structural failure." Camille turned to the stage, addressing Richard. 3 years ago, you forced Henri to leave me," Camille said, her voice projecting to the rafters. "You told him that his father, the late Jonathan Prescott, had embezzled $12 million from the Joint Construction Fund. You showed him bank transfers. You showed him ledgers. You told Henri that if he didn't marry your daughter and merge the companies, you would send his father to prison." The crowd murmured. The scandal was juicy, but confusing. "It was a lie," Camille stated. "You have no proof," Richard roared, his face turning a deep, vascular purple. "Security, remove her now. She's hysterical." "Show them," Camille said into her mic. On the massive screens behind Richard, the video feed of the server room vanished. It was replaced by a static image of a bank transfer document. "This is the document Richard showed Henri," Camille narrated, pacing like a lawyer in a closing argument. "A transfer of $2 million to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands, dated June 12, 2019, signed by Jonathan Prescott." She clicked the remote. The image zoomed in on the signature. "Looks authentic, doesn't it?" Camille asked. "Except for one problem." She clicked again. A new document appeared, a hospital admission form. On June 12, 2019, Jonathan Prescott was in Mount Sinai Hospital undergoing emergency bypass surgery. He was under general anesthesia for 6 hours. Unless he learned to sign international wire transfers while unconscious and intubated, that signature is a forgery. The room erupted. Whispers turned into shouts. Henri stared at the screen. His knees went weak. He grabbed the edge of the table to steady himself. The hospital. He remembered that day. He had been in the waiting room, terrified he was going to lose his dad. He hadn't even checked the dates on Richard's evidence. He had been so overwhelmed by the threat, so blinded by fear, that he hadn't seen the impossible timeline. He didn't do it, Henri whispered, the realization crashing over him like a wave. My dad. He didn't do it. No, he didn't, Camille said softly, turning back to him. But someone did. She clicked the remote again. The screen changed to a complex spreadsheet, rows and rows of numbers highlighted in red. This, Camille announced, pointing to the screen, is the actual ledger from the Beauchamp Global private server. The one Richard keeps offline so the IRS can't find it. I extracted it 3 hours ago. You stole it, Richard screamed. He was panic-stricken now, looking for an exit, but the crowd was too dense. I liberated it, Camille corrected, and what it shows is fascinating. The $12 million wasn't stolen by the Prescotts. It was funneled into a shell company called Apex Holdings. And guess who is the sole signatory for Apex Holdings? The screen flashed a passport photo. It was Richard Beauchamp. Richard Beauchamp has been laundering money for the cartel for a decade. Camille's voice was ice. He was using the construction projects to wash the cash. When the auditors got close, he needed a scapegoat. He needed the Prescott accounts to hide the trail. That's why he needed the merger. That's why he needed Henri. She turned to Henri, her eyes softening for the first time. He didn't want you for your talent, Henri. He wanted you because you were the perfect patsy. He was going to frame you. Once the companies merged, the debt would be transferred to your name. When the feds came, and they were coming, Richard would have been on a beach in non-extradition territory, and you would be in a federal cell for 20 years. Henri looked from the screen to Richard, the man who had played the father figure, the man who had pretended to offer mercy while holding a knife to his throat. Henri's shock dissolved. In its place, a cold, white-hot rage ignited. He slowly pulled his arm away from Sophia. Henri, Sophia whimpered, sensing the shift in gravity. Baby, she's lying. Tell them she's lying. Henri ignored her. He walked toward the stage. He moved with a heavy, dangerous momentum. Richard backed away from the podium. Henri, listen to me. She's manipulating you. We're family. Henri reached the stage and grabbed the microphone stand, ripping the mic from its cradle. You made me believe my father was a thief, Henri said. His voice wasn't loud, but it was terrifyingly steady. You made me break the heart of the only woman I ever loved. You made me live in a prison of your making for 3 years. You stole my life. I did what was necessary for business, Richard snarled, cornered. Business. Henri stepped closer. You're done, Richard. There is no merger. There is no wedding. There is only you and the end of the line. Henri turned to the back of the room. Liam? The service doors swung open. Liam O'Connor walked in. But he wasn't alone. Behind him were 6 agents in windbreakers emblazoned with 3 yellow letters. FBI. Richard Beauchamp, Liam called out, his voice ringing with satisfaction. I have a warrant for your arrest on charges of racketeering, wire fraud, and money laundering. And Sophia? We have a warrant for you too. Conspiracy to commit fraud. Turns out your signature is on the Apex documents as the secretary. Sophia screamed. It was a primal, ugly sound that shattered the last veneer of her elegance. Daddy, do something. But Richard couldn't do anything. The agents swarmed the stage. The guests pulled out their phones, recording the downfall of a dynasty in real time. The flashes of the cameras were like lightning in a storm. Richard was cuffed, his face pressed against the polished wood of the stage he had just been pontificating from. Sophia was dragged away, kicking and sobbing, her silver dress catching on a chair leg and ripping. A poetic end to her facade. In the chaos, the crowd began to scatter, the gala dissolving into a frenzy of gossip and panic. But amidst the swirling madness, 2 people stood perfectly still. Henri stepped down from the stage. He walked to where Camille stood in the center aisle. She was still holding the remote, her chest heaving slightly, the adrenaline beginning to fade into exhaustion. She looked at him, the man she had hated, the man she had loved. Henri looked at her. He saw the fire in her eyes, the steel in her spine. He realized that the woman standing before him wasn't just the girl he had left at the altar. She was something far greater. She was a force of nature. "You came back," Henri said, his voice cracking. He reached out a hand but stopped, afraid to touch her, afraid she was a hallucination. "After everything I did to you, you came back." "I didn't come back for you, Henri," Camille said, though her voice lacked its earlier bite. "I came back for the truth. I couldn't let him win." "You saved me," Henri whispered. "I didn't deserve it, but you saved me." "No," Camille shook her head slowly. "You didn't deserve it. You were an idiot. You were a coward. You should have told me the truth 3 years ago. We could have fought him together." "I know," Henri said, tears finally spilling over, tracking through the makeup of the perfect corporate groom. "I was scared. I thought I was protecting you." "I don't need protection," Camille said, stepping closer until the red silk of her dress brushed against his tuxedo trousers. "I need a partner. And if you ever try to make a decision for me again, I will destroy you myself. Do you understand?" Henri let out a wet, breathless laugh. It was the first time he had genuinely smiled in 3 years. "I understand. I promise. Never again." He looked at the ring on his finger, the heavy gold band Sophia had insisted he wear. He pulled it off and threw it into a half-empty glass of champagne on a nearby table. "I have nothing," Henri said, looking around the room. "The company will be seized. My assets will be frozen during the investigation. I'm bankrupt. I'm homeless. I'm a pariah." Camille looked at him. She saw the ruins of his life, but for the first time she didn't see the heavy weight of the Prescott legacy on his shoulders. She saw just him, Henri. "You're not homeless," Camille said. She reached into her clutch and pulled out a keycard. It was for the penthouse suite of the Obsidian Tower, the project they had built together, the building she had fought him on, the building that was now the only clean asset left standing. "The Obsidian Tower is technically owned by the architectural firm holding the lien," Camille said with a smirk, "which means it's under my jurisdiction, and I'm looking for a property manager. The pay is terrible, the boss is a tyrant, and you'll have to sleep on the couch until you earn your way back into the bedroom." Henri looked at the keycard. Then he looked at her. The love in his eyes was so raw, so overwhelming, it almost brought her to her knees. "I'll take the job," he said. "Good." Camille turned, her red dress swirling. "Now get me out of here. I'm starving, and this place smells like expensive lies." Henri offered her his arm. She took it. They walked out of the Plaza Hotel together, stepping over the ruined flowers and the spilled wine. Outside, the night air of New York City was cold and biting, filled with the sirens of the police cars taking the Beauchamp away. The paparazzi were waiting. As the doors opened, a wall of flashes erupted, blinding and chaotic. Reporters shouted questions, thrusting microphones into their faces. "Mr. Prescott, is it true? Ms. Vane, did you orchestrate the leak? Are you two together?" Henri didn't answer. He didn't look down. He tightened his grip on Camille's hand, lifted his chin, and walked straight through the flashing lights. He had lost his fortune. He had lost his status. But as he looked at the woman in the red dress walking beside him, the woman who had burned down a kingdom to find him in the ashes, Henri Prescott knew he was the richest man in New York. He was finally free. And this time, he wasn't letting go. Sometimes, the only way to fix a broken foundation is to demolish the whole house. Henri Prescott thought he was sacrificing himself for love, but he learned the hard way that love isn't about sacrifice. It's about standing together in the fire. Camille Vane proved that revenge is sweet, but justice is beautiful. This story reminds us that the truth always has a way of coming out, especially when you have a brilliant architect with a grudge and a flash drive. If you enjoyed this roller coaster of betrayal, redemption, and the ultimate clapback, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. And tell me in the comments, if you were Camille, would you have given Henri a second chance? Or would you have let the FBI take him too? Thanks for watching.